This is the Brian Kelly Press Conference, presented by the Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation.
It's going to be a great challenge, but it's the SEC. Every week it's going to be the same. We certainly have to play 4 quarters. I know that they're anxious and excited about the opportunity to play at Tiger Stadium.
As the Tigers get back to action, hosting the Alabama Crimson Tide on a Saturday night in Death Valley.
Snap to Daniels. Sprint out. Throw to the right. Caught. Right corner of the end zone. Mason Taylor. Tigers win. Tigers win. Hey now.
Coming up, Coach Kelly discusses this week's preparation and practice. But first, from the Capital One Studios, inside legendary Tiger Stadium, here are your hosts, former Tiger Gordy Rush, and the voice of your Fighting Tigers, Chris Blair.
Well, greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome back to Game Week. LSU gets back to it. They'll host Alabama coming up on Saturday night. Busy week here for LSU athletics. We got the press conference kicking things off on Monday. Later tonight, women's basketball will tip off their season against Eastern Kentucky at 7 o'clock inside the Marriott Center. Then on Wednesday night, Matt McMahon and men's basketball will start their season against ULM. Welcome in to the Capital One studio along with Gordy Rush. Gordy, it's good to be back, getting ready to talk LSU Fighting Tiger football. Big game. And before we talk about Alabama and LSU, plenty to break down there. We got to go back. Last time out on the road, Bryan College Station, it's a cliche, but really seemed to ring true last time out, and that is a tale of two halves. LSU falls to Texas A&M, hostile environment. Second half, things just went downhill very quickly at about the 8-minute mark there in the third quarter after the Tigers had a 10-point lead on 2 occasions. Texas A&M made the switch at quarterback, took what appeared to be quite a bit of time for LSU to adjust, and the crowd got back into it, and it just snowballed after that. And again, LSU falls to Texas A&M by the final of 38-22, or rather 38-23.
Yeah, look, Chris, I'll tell you that when you talk about the new age of college football and all these spread offenses and 4 receivers on the field, to me, what still rings true is to win in the SEC, you need to run the football and you need to stop the run. And in the second half, LSU didn't do either one of them particularly well. And so now they've had 2 weeks to address it, and hopefully you have an opponent that likes to run the football in Alabama, and you one of the best defenses usually in the SEC. So a lot of time to work on it.
Gordy, when you take a look at that matchup, LSU has won games where they've beaten teams, beaten defenses throwing the football. They got great receivers. They got a great quarterback. There's really no question there. But that was the first game to me, I wanted to get your thoughts, where it looked like A&M defensively really forced LSU to be one-dimensional and then played the pass really well. And that, again, in the second half, 3 interceptions, they got pressure. I mean, that seemed to be the difference because we've seen teams who basically said Arkansas, They said we're going to try to stop the run, but LSU was still successful throwing the ball, although they did get a pretty good running day. But without the running game, it really loomed large that there was really not much they could do to get in the end zone.
Well, Texas A&M had one of the best front 6 to 7 defenses in the country. Their defensive linemen and linebackers, and so once LSU got one-dimensional and if they were struggling to run the football, they had to throw the football. I thought A&M did a great job with that front 6, and they brought a ton of pressure packages. As I talked to Coach Kelly in the locker room on the post-game show, I saw a lot of 7 coverages, and they ran a lot of different exotic-looking coverages behind it. Forced Garrett took a couple shots, forced him to rush some decisions. Obviously, he made some bad decisions. They just did an outstanding job defensively on LSU.
Well, again, even with the loss, second loss of the season, first in SEC play, we come out of another wild weekend in the SEC. Now you look at the standings. Again, in the top 25, 7 SEC teams. There are 4 of those SEC teams in the top 12 as we sit here. And, of course, the first playoff look is going to come tomorrow night. But still, everything is out there in front of you. And it was interesting last week, when Coach Kelly during the off week met with the media. I mean, that you could tell that was kind of on his mind, and that certainly has got to be on the team's mind going into this matchup. I mean, you look at the SEC right now. 5 teams with one loss?
5 teams.
And, LSU's right there in the mix. Alabama coming in Saturday, we'll talk more about later. 2 losses. Again, that makes this matchup Saturday monumental. And the fact that you're upset you lost the game and the way that you lost the game, Coach Kelly, I thought, was very clear in the fact that you want to get out and play, after that disappointing effort in the second half. And they've had to wait, which I think he's going to try to use as a motivating factor and really ramp this team up because they want to get that taste out of their mouth. No,
absolutely. You want to get back there on the field. Alabama, on the other hand, they put together their most complete game of the year. I believe they beat Missouri 34-0, and they come in off again, they were on a bye week as well, so they're going to come in here rested. No doubt. Look, I think it's LSU-Alabama. This game always has had significance to who's going to go to Atlanta and who's not going to go to Atlanta, and you can always circle this game wherever it is. It's going to be a big-time environment.
Well, I imagine today, Coach Kelly, when he takes to the podium over at Football Operations, with that press conference last week, it seemed like a lot of the questions about Texas A&M and that game in particular kind of was covered. And I'm sure there'll be some of that again today. But I think more of it's from our friends in the media are going to be more about getting healthy last week, who's going to be available this week for LSU, and really just getting better as a team and how they're going to face Alabama. I don't expect a lot of questions to go back to the last game.
I think you said it's healthy. Who's healthy now? And because that was a very physical football game. Both teams had people go down. And then secondly, if anything, okay, Coach, you struggled with a running quarterback and arguably in a conference that's full of fantastic quarterbacks that can run the football, this may be the best in Jalen Milroe. And, he obviously had a big game against LSU last year up in Tuscaloosa, and stopping Jalen Milroe and making sure he doesn't beat you is job number one.
Again, it's a 2-loss Alabama team in the SEC, 1 loss for LSU. For all intents and purposes, the loser of the game Saturday probably on the outside and going to stay on the outside for the SEC title game and obviously the college football playoff. Now, a lot of things can happen. We still got 4 weeks. But again, you certainly put yourself in a good spot if you're LSU and you can come up with a victory at home Saturday night. We'll take a quick break. We come back. Again, it's going to be number 14 according to the AP, LSU. Number 11, Alabama, coming in on Saturday. We'll find out what Gordy knows about Alabama as we lead you up to 12 noon in the Brian Kelly press conference. Be back right after this.
There was a time when a person's word was enough. A time when a handshake meant something, and integrity really mattered. For over 70 years, the values of Farm Bureau Insurance have been rooted in hard work, faith, and family. In that time, we've seen the world change in many ways. What hasn't wavered is Farm Bureau Insurance's commitment to protect our customers' way of life and serve the communities in which they live when they need us most. You deserve more. You deserve a promise. Learn more at lafarmbureau.com.
Join the celebration of Great American RV Superstores as we mark our 40th anniversary. Enjoy over 40% off MSRP and upgrade to an RV that fits your lifestyle. Hurry to your nearest Great American RV Superstores or visit greatamericanrv.com. It's time to make the most of our 40 years, and when we celebrate, you save big. Great deals, greater adventures at Great American RV Superstore. Making memories one weekend at a time. 2023 Jayco J Flight 224BH. Stock number 51600 in Heflin. MSRP $40,079. Gar savings $21,088. Sale price $18,991 plus tax, title, and license.
Tiger fans, this is Eddie Kennison, former LSU football wide receiver. If you know me, you know I'm all about making big plays.
Tigers win! Tigers win!
That's why I joined the team at LSU Sports Properties. Our goal here is to help businesses make big plays both on and off the field. If you want to give your brand that competitive edge and be a part of the biggest stage in college sports, give the corporate sponsorship team at LSU Athletics a call. Your brand, our fans. Utilize the power of LSU Athletics to promote your business and sponsor LSU Athletics today. Call 225-578-2788. Go Tigers.
LSU Tiger fans are gearing up with real Tigers apparel and merchandise from the official online store at lsushop.net. Get jerseys, sideline gear, polos, t-shirts, hats, official team merchandise from Nike, accessories, and much more. Over 3,600 products, all shipped right to your door. Head to the place real Tiger fans go for the selection only real Tiger fans get at lsushop.net. Just moments away from the Brian Kelly press conference, presented by the Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation. Once again, here are Gordy Rush and Chris Blair.
Back here inside the Capital One studio, leading you up to the Brian Kelly press conference. Going to start right around 12 noon today. Coach Kelly will address the media and take questions from football operations. Gordy, I mentioned it's a huge week, and I should also mention, along with women's and men's basketball tipping off, Coach Sean Hudson, LSU soccer, got their first win in the SEC tournament over the weekend, put down Auburn 2-1. They're playing tomorrow against the number 3 seed Texas over on the Gulf Coast. So best of luck to LSU soccer in the postseason as well. Coming up, it's Alabama and it's LSU. And Gordy, you said it right before we went to break. I mean, whether it's the BCS, whether it's a 14 playoff, or whether it's 12, I mean, this game seems to always be one that has implications for both the SEC and the college football playoff, and it's not going to be any different this year.
No, both teams, this is you're out. Basically, loser, you're out of the race for the chance to get to the college football playoffs for Alabama. And when you look at the picture of Alabama this year, I think Kalen DeBoer's done a nice job considering following Nick Saban, considering he lost 39 players to the NFL draft or transfer portal. That's half the team. So you got a new staff, new faces trying to put it together. Obviously, Alabama fans aren't used to losing 2 games, but by the time they get to Baton Rouge in the second weekend in November. But it's been a transition year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, when you look at it, I took a look at their 2 losses, obviously to Vanderbilt and Tennessee. And one of the things that jumps out in the Vanderbilt game, the time of possession was unbelievable. I mean, it was so in favor of the Commodores. Mm-hmm. But both Tennessee and Vanderbilt able to outrush Alabama. And to me, that was the telltale sign, because in their big win, probably their biggest win of the year, over the Georgia Bulldogs, they held Georgia to just 80 yards rushing, which sounds like the Alabama defense of old, and outrushed them, I think, 173 yards on the ground. So that's the first part. And Jalen Milroe, of course, leads the team in rushing. So no surprise. As you pointed out earlier, last year, Jalen Milroe was the feature in that win for Alabama. I think he'll play big again in this one Saturday.
No question. LSU's got to stop Jalen Milroe. And it is, again, I think Kalen DeBoer's trying to meet him halfway. At times, he looks like Michael Penix in the offense. They're running a lot of from the pocket, throwing the football, stuff we didn't see a year ago in Tuscaloosa. And then they get back to the zone read packages, and they've been really effective running the football. They didn't run the ball this well a year ago, Chris. I think the team as a team, they averaged 4 yards per carry. They're doing 5 now. But more importantly, Miller and Haynes, the 2 running backs, both over 6.1 and 6.4 respectively per carry. That's really, really strong. And, of course, Milroe, his is deceptive because he takes a couple sacks. So you've got the transition on that side of the football. And Kane Womack is a defensive coordinator. He was with DeBoer at Indiana for 1 year in 2019. He gave up the head coaching spot at South Alabama to go up to Alabama. And he's famous for this 4-2-5 swarm, kind of a nickel defense. It's a transition from Saban's 3-4. So, again, I think they're trying to work things out, teach the kids a different scheme. They lost their 4 best defensive players to the NFL draft, Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry to the NFL. And, of course, Dallas Turner, who put the KO hit on Jaden Daniels last year, is now in the NFL. So, defensively, they're going through a transition as well.
When you talk offense, obviously Milroe is the featured piece, got 2 nice running backs, and he's got 6 interceptions on the year, 5 in SEC play, where, again, there's times where he's kind of a pocket passer. And he's got some pretty good targets, and it starts with the youngster, Ryan Williams, who I think is averaging 20 yards per reception and leads the team in receptions on the year.
Yeah, and that's a concern for LSU. You've got to account for Milroe. The problem, Williams plays that X wide receiver out there, so he's going to be man-on-man out there with either Alexander or Stamps, and that's where he's done his damage. He has made some amazing catches out there. He's got great speed, and he does a great job of finding the football in the air.
You mentioned the defense, again, with the change schematically, and one of the things that's it's interesting when you look at Alabama is again, in those 2 losses, both Vanderbilt and Tennessee made enough plays offensively, obviously, to get the win. But they also lead the SEC in league games in takeaways. They're at +7 in the turnover margin, which, again, the offense has certainly proven it can put up points. So that's number one. And defensively, it's got to be huge. I'm sure Coach Kelly's going to talk about it, to be able to take some of the pressure off Garrett Nussmeier, because that's basically what happened against Texas A&M. It was Garrett versus the A&M defense. That can't be the case against Alabama.
No question. LSU's going to have to run the football a little bit, and Coach again in the post game, we talked about that. They can't put all of it on Garrett. I mean, it makes it really difficult when everybody in the stadium knows he's going to throw the football. They've got to be able to run the football. I think what's encouraging is that I think it was a trademark of the Alabama teams under Nick Saban. They were 2 and 3 deep on the offensive and defensive line. They still have athletes up there, but I think A&M, when I think of the best front sevens and the SEC, I'm looking at A&M, I'm looking at South Carolina. I think Alabama is in maybe the next conversation. They're good, but they're not used to what we're seeing. And I think that's what you've seen. You've seen them in a couple scoring matches that maybe we're not accustomed to seeing Alabama in.
Before we went on the air, we were talking a little bit about the Texas A&M game, and we talked about the fact that LSU liable to come in this Saturday, an underdog at home once again, something they're not a stranger to as recently as the Ole Miss matchup. And you talked about how in this day and age, the home field advantage maybe even more important, or at least a little different than maybe it was 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Well, I think we're in an age now where, at least in the SEC, you no longer see great teams. I think that there's more parity. So maybe you don't see the A-plus roster. You see a lot of A-minus teams, B-plus teams. And that being said, as the teams are closer, the home field means a lot. Look at South Carolina against Texas A&M. Williams-Brice was amazing, and that team fed off of that. And obviously College Station was special 2 weeks ago. And so to me, it's usually a 3-point swing, a home field advantage. Give me 5 to 6 these days. I just think it's a much bigger deal.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting with the 12-team playoff. We're still having the same conversation that we were having with a 4-team playoff, that you get to week 8, week 9 of the season, and you may have 3 or 4 games remaining, and your destiny may be decided after this Saturday night when you look at the SEC standings the way they are.
Not only that, but 5 years ago, you'd say the winner of the LSU-Alabama game's in the SEC championship, but you still have to go to the Swamp, and I know they're down a couple quarterbacks, but Vandy's coming in the Tiger Stadium. And all Vandy's reigning Alabama state champs right now.
Exactly.
They beat Alabama and Auburn, and in Oklahoma. I know Oklahoma's down a little bit this year, but it's still Oklahoma. In this day and age, anybody can beat anybody in the SEC.
Well, it's going to be an exciting night. I mean, obviously, under the lights, Saturday night, Death Valley. It was a special one, and last time these two teams got together back in 2022. And you just get a sense that, as I said earlier, this team having to sit a week, again, number one, because they needed to get healthy. And I'm sure that'll be one of the topics talked about. Because I felt like in that game against Texas A&M, we talked about C.J. Daniels being that possession-type receiver. If you need 6 to 8 yards and you got to go to the passing game, he's kind of been the guy. But you want to check on his status. You want to see how Chris Hilton came out of the game against Texas A&M, his first game back. They took a couple of shots trying to get to him, and you kind of imagined his last game was January 1st in the bowl game, and since then there had to be a little bit of rust. So maybe he got all that out last time out. And Aaron Anderson you want to check on. Number of guys you want to check on. Dellinger up front.
And for me, Caden Durham. Caden Durham's played hurt the last 2 weeks. I mean, he had both of those ankles heavily taped. He now got the weekend off, and he's going to be huge, again, as LSU's trying to establish the run game.
Again, LSU and Alabama, number 14 and number 11, around 6:42, 6:44. I think they'll kick it off, and it should be very similar, I think, to the Ole Miss Saturday night, which is going to be fantastic. And it'll be an exciting day to be on campus. I mean, I know there's some people around the league that were upset that Alabama and LSU, got the night game this weekend.
The visor guy?
Yeah, but I think it's proven itself worthy of prime time for as many years as they've done it.
I mean, look, the networks are not going to go away from what's working, and LSU, Alabama has always put up big numbers.
I was asked this week real quickly before Coach Kelly joins us about the field goal and special teams issues against Texas A&M. And I really felt like, and you correct me, you're down there on the field, it felt like it was an anomaly. I mean, when you look at what they've been able to do all season up until that game, I don't know that there were any complaints prior to that.
No, you got veteran battery right there. All three guys have played. I think they'll fix it this week.
All right, Coach Brian Kelly now joining us from football operations for the Brian Kelly press conference. Thanks, Gordy.
See. Well, recap. We'll start with a recap. Obviously coming off of an open week, gave our guys an opportunity to certainly recover, but work on, those things that we needed to get better at from the A&M game. And I think they're pretty obvious, right, in terms of, our ability to have balance on offense. The quarterback running game, special teams, consistency in that area. We're all focused opportunities for us during the bye week. So recovery, areas to improve on within the execution of our offense, defense, and special teams. And again, get some conditioning, weight training in as well. So brought the guys back yesterday, got a chance to do scouting reports and weight train and get an opportunity to, give our guys an opportunity, a bonus, if you will, look at Alabama. And now we take on an outstanding football team, probably as balanced of a football team that we're going to play this year. And when I mean balanced, I don't mean necessarily in terms of offense, defense, in terms of 50-50. I mean talent level across the board. Apparently no weaknesses in my eyes relative to their talent level. I think, sometimes when we look at teams, we look at, potential weaknesses at a particular position. I don't see any with this team. Defensive line, linebackers, secondary, safeties, corners, offensive line, running backs, quarterback, wide receivers. This is a extremely talented football team with no apparent weaknesses. Well coached, and certainly, a football team that, we'll have to play our best against. Leading into the game, the keys to success are pretty obvious from an offensive standpoint, taking care of the football. As I mentioned earlier, we'll have to have better balance, offensively, and that will be a prerequisite. Defensively, stopping the quarterback is going to be paramount. Milroe's outstanding. He also can throw the football, so he is a dual threat. I think first down is an important down as well. I mean, they're one of the best third down and short conversion teams in the country. We need to get them behind the chains. So that'll be an important element of the game. Again, continue to get the ball to our playmakers. Neismar is still second in SEC in passing with 20 touchdowns. Lacey, Taylor, Anderson, all have been big play guys for us. Swinson and Weeks on defense, continue to play to our strengths. Is going to be absolutely important. Kalen DeBoer's done a great job. Wherever he's been, they had a great victory against a top 25 team in Missouri and beating them 34-0. And, of course, they've got the great win over a number one Georgia team earlier in the season. So, as I mentioned, Milroe, tandem backs and Miller and Haynes, we all have heard and seen about what Ryan Williams can do. Tight ends, they're deep. Offensive line, experienced. And then defensively, I think Malachi Moore is probably one of the most productive safeties in the country. Lawson is a handful, probably one of the more experienced linebackers in the country. Overton is the transfer from A&M. I mean, it's a really good football team. Nicholson won the Groza last year at kicker. So as I mentioned, it's a team that has no apparent weaknesses in my eyes in terms of every single position up and down the board. Again, we're up for the challenge. We're excited about it. Playing at Tiger Stadium has been good medicine for us. Now we've got to go out and execute and play LSU football for 4 quarters. So with that, we'll open up to questions.
Hey, Brian. Was Garrett Dillinger's ankle sprain the kind that would require did it require a surgery?
Yeah, he had a tightrope surgery, so he will be out for this weekend's game against Alabama.
Hey, Coach, a lot of people are calling this a playoff game in itself. Do you embrace that kind of talk? Does that give urgency to it, or does it create anxiety and you stay away from that?
Yeah, I think, each game that we play is a new game in itself, and I think it goes to what I talked about. We're much more focused on playing 4 quarters of football. Our focus last week was, cleaning up the things that we needed to take care of internally. And so our focus, where our real work was thinking about what we needed to do better to play at a higher level. Look, all that other stuff is out there, but it doesn't help us relative to what we need to do. And I know there's been other national talks about, this is an elimination game. Well, if this is an elimination game, every game in the SEC is an elimination game. Everybody that has a loss, everybody that has 2 losses, everybody that plays each other, it's an elimination game. So we can kind of put that to rest. This is really about each team in the SEC knows where they're at, right? I mean, the record speaks for itself. This is about you need to play your very best when your best is needed.
Coach, we talked a lot about how the running game is important to stay ahead of the sticks, but how important is a guy also like Aaron Anderson in the slot who can, kind of keep you guys ahead of the sticks in the quick game?
Yeah, no doubt, and he's been there for us, right? I mean, I think we have, guys like Mason Taylor and Aaron Anderson, and then certainly Kyron Lacey's been big for us on 3rd down. We've got to be more consistent across the board and. Creating a little bit more uncertainty in terms of what we are doing and making sure that we can, get the ball to the playmakers, but be able to include that in a variety of different ways and include, the screen game and misdirection and the running game and create a little bit more uncertainty in terms of what we're doing offensively. And I think you'll see that as we continue to move forward.
Ryan, in that regards, C.J. Daniels seems to be so pivotal to opening up a lot of your offense. How healthy is he? Can you kind of elaborate on what he gives you guys as far as versatility? And then just with the potential of a storm coming this weekend, how much do you monitor that? How much have you talked with the conference about that?
Yeah, so C.J. is much better than he was, obviously, going into the A&M game. And I thought he did a terrific job getting himself ready. I thought our training staff did an incredible job, our doctors, in helping him get ready for a game that, in many instances it was a game-time decision. I know a lot of you were there, and you saw him working out before the game to get himself ready. Unfortunately, he couldn't answer the bell in the second half, but he's further along. We don't have to put out a report, but I would say he's much better than he was a couple of weeks ago, and the expectation would be that he's going to be able to help us. Goodness, I mean, there's so many things to consider going into the Alabama game. The one thing I didn't have to think about, I thought, was another storm coming. But as we get closer to game time, probably tomorrow, we'll probably have to look a little bit closer at the weather situation, but is definitely on the list now.
Yeah, Brian. Last month of the season coming up, SEC, a lot of one-loss team, a lot of two-loss teams. NIL, has it created the parity that you see in pro football? Has it brought that to college football?
Yeah, I don't know that. It's hard for me to really assess that like halfway through the season and looking at the rosters. Look, there's been transfers, right? There's been transfers from different schools that have made impacts, and maybe some have negatively impact rosters. But those are choices, right? Those are choices that programs and coaches make. So, I don't know that if you take in its totality, whether it's been a plus or a minus. I think some schools would say it's been a positive for us. Some might say, well, maybe I shouldn't have made this decision, but it's still a choice that you make. So in terms of being able to kind of give a statement as to whether it's good or bad, I think it's out there. And then you have to make that individual decision as to, whether, that's something that you want to be part of relative to the transfer portal. But NIL is a good thing. NIL is a positive thing that you have to be able to manage within your program. And I don't think that has sidetracked us. I think transfers and making decisions on all of those things has probably been one of the bigger issues, because it changes your roster, it changes the chemistry, it changes, how you look at your roster each and every year.
You talked about it last week, using last week to clean some things up. How was that received from the guys? Is it something as simple as when you see tape, it really clicks with them, or is there further explanation needed?
Well, I think each situation is different. Look, they clearly knew what happened in the Texas A&M game. I mean, just to recap, we turned the ball over 3 times and we couldn't stop a quarterback. We didn't have the emotional flexibility to kind of flip the switch. And did we spend enough time in helping our guys do that, right? So this is coaches coaching and players playing. Did we do our best? And obviously we did not, right? So collectively, we all had to take ownership in that last week. So it wasn't a fun week to be around, but we've put that past us, and our focus and attention has been on working on getting better in those areas that we know that we have to get better in as coaches and players, and getting prepared for a really good Alabama team.
Coach, right down here to your left, can you talk a little bit about Paul Mabinga and what you guys saw out of him in that A&M game, and just in terms of getting him ready to maybe go for maybe more than just one game this week?
Yeah, I mean, Paul has steadily worked himself up into what would have been what I would call a key backup, right? Somebody that, is poised to go in a pivotal time, and you expect him to get the job done. Now he's a starter for us, most likely, for at least this week, right? And so his development has been one where I think he's made his most progress through execution. He's a quick study. You don't have to tell him twice. He understands our scheme in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. This has been really just about the physical development of Paul, more so than it has been about his mental abilities relative to picking up what we want to do and how we want to do it.
In what ways is Jalen Milroe maybe used differently in Kalen DeBoer's offense than what they asked him to do a year ago under Tommy Rees?
Well, last year, Matt, it was evolving. I don't know that they knew what they wanted to do because it was a quarterback controversy. But they were kind of playing multiple quarterbacks last year at Alabama. I think they had 2 or 3 quarterbacks going back and forth. Then they kind of settled on Milroe just before they got to us, and it was, I think, big chunk play. It was run the quarterback. Here they've had all spring, and they've settled on a system with a starting quarterback. So it's consistency week in and week out. They're doing the same thing with him week in and week out. So there's a comfort level within the offense. When we got to him last year, you weren't really sure what you were going to get. It was a little bit of everything. And now there's a consistency within their offensive structure, and there's a comfort level in terms of what he's doing.
Brian, recently Jacoby Guillory just said he decided he's going to use his last year of eligibility in return. What does that mean for you guys next year? I know we're still got a lot of games to play this year, but just being able to know that he's going to be back for the defense next year, just kind of how much of a boost is that?
Well, he's a stalwart. He's a physically gifted player, strong, mature. He brings a presence, certainly for us in terms of the leadership part. And he's a really good football player. So you're just adding some stability to the defensive line, with some really good young players that are getting seasoned this year. So whereas much as it was a concern or a question mark coming into the season, I think as we evolve through the season, with having him back and the guys that have gotten a lot of work at that position and in recruiting, I think we're going to find that back to being what it should be here at LSU, and that's a strength at that position.
Coach, after the A&M game, you said we need to get Garrett Nussmeier some help. We need to help him out. How productive was the open date in terms of looking at your running game and some of those other things that you can improve on in this Bama game?
Yeah, I mean, I stand behind my comments. Now they have to come to fruition, right? I mean, we've got to go do it. And part of it was, look, I mean, Garrett can't be the guy that feels like he's got to go do everything. And part of it has to come from Garrett to understand that, I don't have to make a play every time I'm out there. 0 is okay, right? So a little bit comes from Garrett, and a little bit comes from play calling, and a little bit comes from, the ability to commit to making sure that we have some more balance in terms of the running game. And that means we got to block better, and I don't mean just the 5 guys. I mean, the receivers and the tight end and the backs got to do a better job of seeing things and getting to the second level and making people miss. So it's an all-in thing, right? When we say that, it's not just saying one guy's got to do a better job at, giving Garrett, more assistance. Everybody's got to be involved in that.
Oh, yeah, Coach, right here. Obviously, it's going to be a big game for guys like Zy Alexander and Ashton Stamps going head-to-head with Ryan Williams and Bernard. Just what have you seen from that tandem over the last several weeks in terms of their development as you've settled into those two guys, and how has maybe Corey Raymond had an impact on their development this year? Yeah, I mean, look,
I'd like to stand here each and every week and credit, Corey or Bo Davis or Brad Davis or Joe Sloan. I mean, that comes with the territory, right? At the end of the day, players have to play consistently based upon trusting the technique and trusting their ability. I think what we see here with the corners in particular is a trust in the teaching and then a trust in themselves. They're trusting themselves a lot more. They're playing with a lot more confidence. And I think that's the next step in the maturation of a player like Stamps, for example. I think Alexander's had a little bit more of that because he's a little bit more of an older player in a sense, right? But that's really it, right? Players playing with more confidence, I think, at that position, trusting their teaching, and certainly trusting themselves that they can go out there and they can play with a great deal of confidence and swagger.
Hey, Coach, over here, a little bit of a two-parter. First, college game day, coming to campus, the first time since you've been the head coach at LSU. Just talk about them coming over here to LSU and getting prepared for a big game and get your guys maybe not distracted by the big environment this Saturday. And the second part, Kalen DeBoer. I know he went up the coaching ranks like yourself from Division II up to now. Just what have been some of the conversations you've had with him since he become the head coach at Alabama?
Yeah, we're excited about having game day here. Certainly it's great for the community. It's certainly great for our campus. The exposure of game day, does a great deal for, the just entire identity, right, of Baton Rouge, the state of Louisiana, LSU. College football is kind of like the hub, when you bring it in. So I think that's going to create a lot of excitement, and we're pleased that they've chosen LSU for that. Kalen and I have not had a chance to speak, but just in passing, it's just one of those things where he was playing for a national championship, then got the job, and it's been kind of a whirlwind for him. So anytime that we've gotten together, it's been in passing. But we do share a common bond, and, we both worked our way up. We both learned how to do the laundry, literally and figuratively. And so, those kinds of experiences lend itself to having a mutual respect for each other. And I know I respect the work that he's done, and he's continuing to do it on every level.
Ryan, your thoughts, if any, on the SEC apparently cracking down on teams faking injuries? And also a second question, if you have time. Didn't you guys make a point earlier this year to try to get your players registered to vote and voting?
Yeah.
And how did that go? Even give a percentage.
Well, I thought that the memo was timely. Appreciate our commissioner standing out amongst college football and making it, clear that this kind of, I think, nonsense was maybe the word that was used, needs to stop. It's silly. The game doesn't need to get to a level where, you're using that as a way to slow down a game, one way or the other. Be that as it may, I think just standing up and saying enough's enough is what needed to happen, and I'm glad the commissioner did that. As far as voting, I don't have the exact numbers, but I know that our players, when we've asked them to be involved in the community, they have been on it. We took the time to ask them to vote and register to vote. So my expectations are that they're pretty tuned into how important this election is, and every election. And when we brought in Go Vote, which is a local community organization here on campus, they talk not only about the presidential election, but how important the local elections are that can impact your communities. So we didn't just talk about the presidential elections. We talked about the local elections, how important they are in terms of things that are important to you. So this was not kind of just, hey, go out and vote. This was we spent time with our players and making sure they understood the impact at grassroots levels, how important it is to vote.
Hey, Coach, does Dellinger have a chance to return later in the season, like postseason, or
we're expecting him to have a solid chance for Florida.
Brian, with the running game, is it something where y'all thought maybe because Garrett just hasn't gotten that part of his game yet, where he's taking the ball and running it himself on zone reads and those sorts of things, that maybe that needs to change in the offense?
I would like to give you a simple answer, but it's not a simple answer. There are, when you're in 11 personnel, one back personnel, it becomes a numbers game, right? And so those numbers have to be right. The quarterback has to get you in the right plays. Your backs really need to be good at discerning, what the right cut is. Your tight ends and receivers have to be really good at blocking on the perimeter. This is an all-in thing. And look, the question is a good question, but it has a lot of layers to it. We have to be better, and we need to be better.
Yeah, Brian, can you give an update on West Weeks, just his health situation, if you all plan on playing him again for the remainder of the season?
He's got games remaining. Our hope is, because he has another season of eligibility, that if we could save that season of eligibility, we would prefer to do that. We've had a conversation with the family and with West about doing that. We think he's an outstanding leader. We feel as though, as things move forward, to have a veteran presence coming back next season would be in everybody's best interest. But we've made it clear, if there's an injury and there's a need to win football games and win a championship, he's got to be ready. So it's kind of where we're at right now relative to Wes.
Right down here, Coach. In the preseason and kind of throughout the season, the defensive line, especially the interior, talked about a need and a want to develop and being more violent, not just being guys that kind of stick up an offensive line, but being violent and getting in the backfield. Where have you seen some of these guys grow? Gio Paez being one of those guys, and then you coach at the D2 level, just a guy like JVR Suggs becoming a contributor and making some plays for you guys.
Yeah, so each guy has a different Well, first of all, they're all the same in terms of how they're coached. Bo does a really good job of treating everybody, equally and fairly. But each one has a different skill set. Like Suggs, for example, has got great feet and is a slippery pass rusher. Gio is a real solid, gap-conscious player against the run. Not that he can't rush the passer, he can. But just pointing out what their difference is. Sean is emerging as a player that's big and physical, that can give us some snaps. And Ahmad Bro has been a very active player for us, using his hands extremely well. So it's really kind of mix and match. And then we've moved Parashand inside, who gives us a little bit of a veteran presence and a little bit of all those things, just not quite as physically as big as those guys. He's about 285 pounds. So it's really been taking the strengths of each one of those guys and matching them, given the circumstances.
Hey, Coach. Alabama is the fourth team with the most flags during the season. What can you guys do to create those flags and take advantage of that?
I mean, I think, hopefully our crowd's loud and will cause a lot of pre-snap penalties. That's one thing we can hope for. Maybe the lights, we'll turn the lights off on them a couple of times. We're going to try everything. But, other than that, it's really about, for us, maintaining our composure. And really, for us, we can't be that team, that gets flagged. Look, there's always going to be a penalty, because there's extra effort, and I get that. But, we can't have the pre-snap penalties. We can't have the ones that are out of emotion. And so, we'll look to continue to play hard, and hopefully that Tiger Stadium becomes a little bit too much for the Crimson Tide to handle. All right, thank you.
Coach Brian Kelly with this week's press conference. A couple of updates there. Garrett Dellinger going to be out for some time, and later in the press conference, Coach Kelly mentioning they hope maybe, optimistically, he could be back for Florida, but will not be available this weekend on the O-line for the Tigers. And also C.J. Daniels. Prognosis looking pretty good after feeling better than he did prior to the Texas A&M game to get him back into that receiver rotation. Other news came out at 12 noon. The matchup, speaking of the Florida Gators, LSU will travel to Gainesville a week from this Saturday, and that game will take place with a kickoff just after 2:30 Central Time. So LSU in Florida at the Swamp at 2:30 a week from this Saturday. We'll take a time out, and when we come back, we'll close up shop, give you some program notes, send you on your way. It's the Brian Kelly Press Conference.
NIL is dominating the college sports scene, and LSU has positioned itself at the front of the pack. But to remain competitive and stay ahead of the rest, we need your support. Bayou Traditions is the official NIL collective of LSU Athletics. Join the tradition and become a member by signing up online at BayouTraditionsCollective.com. Members receive exclusive access to LSU student athletes that you can't get anywhere else. Help ensure LSU remains a leader in the NIL arena. Sign up today at BayouTraditionsCollective.com.
There was a time when a person's word was enough, a time when a handshake meant something, and integrity really mattered. For over 70 years, the values of Farm Bureau Insurance have been rooted in hard work, faith, and family. In that time, we've seen the world change in many ways. What hasn't wavered is Farm Bureau Insurance's commitment to protect our customers' way of life and serve the communities in which they live when they need us most. You deserve more. You deserve a promise. Learn more at lafarmbureau.com.
There's danger out there. It lurks on highways and quiet neighborhood streets. It's more likely to kill you than a shark, and more terrifying than the biggest snake. Distracted driving claims lives every day. Every notification, swipe, social post, video, or selfie while driving risks your life. So while you might think public speaking or the zombie apocalypse is scary, what's really terrifying and even deadly is distracted driving. Eyes forward. Don't drive distracted. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
The Southeastern Conference. It's the land of legends, the places, the faces, and moments.
And he's going for it. It's a touchdown!
We've seen the confetti fall again and again. We're not done. It's time for the next generation to make their mark and go from 14 deep to 16 strong. It's a whole new ball game in the SEC, and it just means more.
Wrapping up this week's Brian Kelly press conference, presented by the Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation, with some final thoughts and programming notes. Here again is Chris Blair.
Coach Brian Kelly addressing the media today. He'll be at TJ Rebs to hang out with fans Thursday night. It's the Brian Kelly Show returning. Starts at 7 o'clock. Hope to have you out there. If you can't join us, listen all across the state on the LSU Sports Radio Network and streaming live on the LSU Sports mobile app. Saturday, going to be a fun one. Campus is going to be a buzz. College game day, and of course our crew will get it started at 4:30 Central Time with our LSU game day. Hunt Palmer, Marlon Favorite, Brandon Taylor will set the table. Jacob Hester, Gordy Rush will then join me inside legendary Tiger Stadium. Kickoff between number 11 Alabama and number 14 LSU will come your way just after 6:30 Central. Hope you'll join us on the air. Join us here in person at Tiger Stadium for an exciting night. And we certainly wish the Tigers the very best on a monumental battle coming up. That'll wrap things up for us here today. Just a quick reminder, again, Florida and LSU, 2:30 Central Time in Gainesville, a week from this Saturday. Thanks to Gordy Rush. Thanks to you for joining us. Hope you'll join us again next Monday for the Brian Kelly Press Conference.
This has been the Brian Kelly Press Conference, presented by the Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation. For the very latest on the Tigers, follow LSU football on X, Facebook, Instagram, and anytime at lsusports.net. The LSU Sports Radio Network, a division of LSU SP and Playfly Sports.